Hey, this is a content warning. Today's episode has stuff that is not good for kids to hear. Not just the normal swearing and silly stuff, but actual kind of grown-up content. So please enjoy this episode, but please be aware that there are adult themes throughout this book. Attention, dear listeners. Do you feel the weight of your forest school sins bearing down upon your soul? Have you hidden a drum because you couldn't handle the noise anymore? Have you lied about the hot chocolate powder being finished? Fear not, for redemption is at hand. We bring you Forgive Me Forest School on the Forest School podcast. Each episode, we, your humble forest school gurus, will absolve you of your nature-based transgressions. Simply visit theforestschoolpodcast.com, linked in the show notes, and submit your forest school confession. Together we will find absolution, laughter, and a renewed commitment to the forest school way of life. Don't miss this opportunity to cleanse your conscience and connect with a community of imperfect nature lovers just like you. Send your transgressions in to us at theforestschoolpodcast.com and enjoy the experience of being forgiven for your forest school sins. Amen. You're listening to the Forest School Podcast. Delicious waffle chat about education, nature connection, child development, community building, and lots more. Hosted by Lewis Ames and Wem Sutherland. Okay, so here's the question. The first question, straight out the gate. And then now this might be a different question than it is for most people. But the question is, how many owls would you have to see in a single day before you went, something's going on? Now, I say that might be different because we've got owls in the woods at the moment. So,
when you say something's going on, do you mean like the other universe has finally found the veil between the worlds and is coming through, starting with the messenger owls, to let us know about the existence of the other universe and about the dark forces that are coming to invade? Is that what you mean?
I think that's implied fairly obviously.
Okay. I think I'd probably have to see...
how many before you go, that's weird?
8.
8? You could see 7 owls and not comment on it?
Yeah, at our work, yeah.
7 owls?
Yeah, I reckon. That would be like 3 babies and 4 adults. That would be like 3 babies from the same nest, their parents, and some jealous one that's come in to cause some mischief.
Mine is way lower.
Is that 7? That doesn't make 8. That makes 7. Anyway.
I think if I saw 3 or 4, I would go, that's...
You'd be looking for the veil.
I'd be
if you saw 3 or 4.
I'd be, I don't know, spinning dreidels and going, something's going on. What's going on with the world?
What's a dreidel?
It's that thing he has in, what's the film that's like, I was going to say Memento. It's not Memento. Inception. He has to spin the dreidel to see if it's like the real world. I'm just interested. I was interested to know.
Okay.
7 is high.
I think didn't I say 8? I think I said 8.
You said 7 and then you did maths that added to 8.
No, it was the other way around. Anyway. How many owls have you seen this year?
This year? 3. Yeah.
Okay.
Guys, if you're enjoying Owl
Good
Chat,
stuff.
you can support us on Patreon at the Forest School Podcast. If you think that Owl Chat is worth the cost of a meal deal once a month, plus loads of extra stuff that you get, we would deeply appreciate it.
I feel like you might be misadvertising though.
Why?
Because you're making it sound like if people join the Patreon, they're going to get like more exclusive Owl Chat, and they really aren't.
I'm going to send owls to their house, and if they don't, see them, that's not on me. They'll be there. All the people on our Patreon have had owls sent to nearby it, but that's not on me to look for them, right? I can't do all the work,
yeah.
right? I'm a facilitator.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the link between owls and Patreon. That they come, they come, but you won't see them. I mean, I'm not even subscribed on Patreons to on my own show, our own show. But there are a lot of owls around my house. Ooh, they're hooty. Like every night at the moment. It's loud. As my son once said when he was very small, it's a bit hooty in here.
It's a bit hooty in here.
Of his
It's
bedroom.
my favourite R&B
I
song.
had to sleep. It's a bit hooty. Yeah.
So take off all your feathers.
I see. You have been, I'm not going to say like aggressively, but kind of aggressively shouting at me, want to talk to you about biophilia for like about 3 weeks. So now's your chance.
Okay, great.
Let rip.
Let rip. Get ready for a dump of info. Are you ready to get dumped on? Are you
I'm ready
for the dumping?
Have you managed to remember it all?
No, I've made myself notes. I've made myself notes. Excellent. So this is very much going to be... let's go back. The biophilia effect, a scientific and spiritual exploration between the healing bond between humans and nature by Clemens G. Harvey. Forward.
Can I ask when this book was published, please?
You can ask. And
I want all of your chats to be Harvard referenced as well, please.
This is the 2015 edition.
Okay, fantastic. Can I show you and tell you the title of another book about biophilia, which I said to you that I was going to read so we could compare and contrast, and then I didn't read.
Yeah.
I read, just in case listeners are interested, I read up to, I don't know, page 12 or something. 21. This one.
Great. And if you're interested in hearing more books that Wem's not read... Okay. I really loved this biophilia book. And hopefully, about, looking at my notes, about 2/3 of the way in, I'm going to go, this is the thing. This is the big thing, right? But I wanted to warm up. I have, because I really want to talk to you about it. And... I know it's going to be good chat. So, okay, biophilia, right? Simple definition, love of life or of living systems. Okay, so this book starts out, and it's, normal waffle at the start. There's some cool facts in it. So, plants exchange information through their fragrances, and there are some people doing impressive work where they're trying to decode it as a language. So like trying to take all the molecules in it, because they have found that some plants... so, there's that one, I can't remember which book it's in. I think it might be Secret Life of Trees, where they talk about the trees in, I forget where, and the giraffes come to nibble them, and they let out a fragrance, and all the other trees downwind pick up on the fragrance and go, oh, better make my leaves bitter. And they do. And now they're cool. Anyway, so, but some people have worked out, in this book, that's saying that not only do some plants say that they are hurt, but they can distinguish through fragrance who is hurting them. So they can send out a fragrance that says, I am being nibbled by a badger, as distinct from, I am being nibbled by a squirrel. And that there is a difference in fragrance between those things. Isn't that amazing? And I can only put that down. It doesn't really go into a huge amount of detail, but I can only put that down to like either where it's being nibbled or the way in which it, like the cuts. If it's like, oh, I'm being ripped, that it must be a badger. Or okay, so the next bit in this book is talking about catacomb imaginative psychotherapy, which we have done some in the woods. So it's seeing unconscious processes like breathing as visualization, and it sends the message from your imagination to the body and increases the rate of those things. So it was talking about like time in nature and doing these meditative things, particularly with nature imagery, and how that can actually have physiological effects on the body. So we tried it out this week with some of our forest school leader students who very graciously went along with me, and I went, I've read this thing, do you want to try it? Thanks. um, and so I was reading and I was doing visualizations of like, your heartbeat is a river and it starts really big at the big gushing waterfall at the start, but as it goes down the landscape, it starts to meander and then it starts to slow down, and as your heart rate starts to slow down and the waters become more calm, and it goes on and on and on. And loads of people afterwards, and I did one about tree roots becoming untwisted and they were gnarly, and that was your muscles, and then they were untwisting with the breeze and becoming loose and the fibers were becoming soft, and people were like, yeah, it worked. It worked. My muscles felt, more chilled. My breathing, my heart rate went down. You said your heart rate went down with the rivers one. Yeah.
Do you think that we lost some of the previous bit?
Maybe. I'll stitch it back together. Yeah, so that was really interesting, and really interesting to do that thing of like, how we talk about sometimes like subconsciously spending time in nature might put you in tune with like, oh, the leaves are growing, and so then you're looking at lots of growth and then you internalize that and you feel like restored. And I wondered whether that is just a thing of being out in nature for a long time. You're seeing these processes, you're visualizing these processes, and so then that goes into your body when you see the woods, particularly when you notice it like fixing itself, or you notice it like hunkering down for the winter, that you also have those processes and your body starts to go. I'd be really interested to know whether people who spend more time in nature have a stronger sense of like restoring over the winter, whether they internally shut down more and go, okay, recuperate, that's what everything is doing. I don't know how you would necessarily test that, but
I don't know either. But the thing I also liked about that Kataheim thing is that the studies that say that actual views of nature, even if you can't be in nature, but you're like looking at a picture of it on your hospital wall and all that stuff, that helps recovery, literally physical recovery in your body. But for people who might not be able to access nature physically or be able to see it, to be able that if you are able to imagine it through a guided meditation like that, that it's doing having the same effect. What I did wonder, and I did sort of say to our group, is for anybody who perhaps finds it really difficult to visualize things in their imagination, like, does that still, like, if you're thinking about the concept of a river without seeing it in your mind's eye, is it still as effective or not? Like, I'd be really intrigued to know.
Well, so there was some interesting stuff about this later on, where they're talking about like showing people interesting landscapes of nature and assessing their like heart rate and their different hormone levels and how that goes. And numerous trials show that humans across the board, regardless of where they live, in the Amazon jungle or in a city or in whatever, have a preference for savanna-style landscapes. So lots of grassland, wide views, particularly trees that will look climbable, is one of the other features that people are looking for. If you had two savannas and one of them has like, those big baobab trees with no branches, and one of them has trees that you can, they've sussed it that is what it is. And I just think that's so interesting as like an evolutionary memory, that something in there still goes, that's the place that humans spent a huge amount of time.
Yeah, because the time that we haven't spent in that environment has been like 2 seconds on the evolutionary clock, hasn't it? It's
but also to say that that's not necessarily like, oh, we spent the last little bit in cities but we still like nature. It is specifically like people who live in deserts prefer savanna landscapes. It's not about people who live in dense thick jungles prefer savanna landscapes. It's not a like, oh, we prefer our home. It's a like something in us as a species, heard something the other day calling it the two-legged tribe. the two-legged tribe, we all have this shared preference.
Yeah.
And also in there, they were saying that we are hardwired to spot sparkling water in landscapes from an incredible distance, because sparkling water indicates that that water is drinkable.
Because it's not murky.
Because it's not murky and because it's slightly moving, but not rushing. It's the level of sparkle is like, that's what we are tuned in for. And we can see it from, like, if you've got the view, 10 miles, you can see a bit of sparkling water. We are, again, predisposed as humans to go and find those things. It's really interesting in this book, talking about, like, the built-in stuff, they're like, oh, that just exists in your body. And then thinking that, okay, anyone that comes to your sessions will have a preference for, having some sort of views, climbable trees, that sparkling water is going to set people off. If you are, like, traveling around, you might want to, like, I was thinking if you were doing, like, an expedition, how interesting it would be to assess, like, group morale when you can see sparkling water in the way that you're heading versus, like, heading off into deepest, darkest Dartmoor, whether that view changes people's kind of like, oh yeah, okay, we're off, we're going, it's just, there's so much stuff in this book. There's so much. Okay.
I wonder if that's like, this is a basic comment. I can see the sea. Who can see the sea? I can see the sea when you're in the car.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I just, while you were chatting,
while you were blathering on,
while you were chatting, I was trying to remember where specifically in Africa the most ancient human remains have been found. Botswana, and now I'm looking at pictures of landscapes in Botswana, and guess what? It's exactly like.
Do you feel calm?
No, because I'm talking to you.
Fucking hell.
No, it's just it was just exactly that. Savannah, trees, water, grassland.
Very
elephants.
Interesting. Okay, tiny fact, and then I'm going to tell you the big one. Tiny fact, in Australia, there's a species of mistletoe that can change the shape of its leaves to match the shape of the species that it is growing on. If it grows on a tree with roundy leaves, it makes roundy leaves. If it grows with a tree with, like, spiky leaves, it makes spiky leaves.
That is mind-blowing, but also like cuckoos laying
right,
eggs,
but how does it...
and making their eggs like the eggs.
How does it get that how does the plant get that information? It's not looking. How does it get the information of, like, make your leaves like this?
I don't know, man.
Nuts.
I don't know.
Absolutely nuts.
How does a holly know, okay, at this height I make my leaves not spiky, and at this height I make them spiky? Like, plant wisdom.
Plant wisdom. Okay, you ready for the big one? This is the one that I've been like, I need to tell you about this thing. Okay, I'm going to read a quote. Ready? In nature, we can be who we are. Hardworking or lazy, sad or happy, fast, slow, introverted or extroverted, heterosexual, homosexual, transsexual, asexual, on top of the world or devastated. We can fit society's image of an ideal body, or we can have a body that does not conform at all. Nature, animals, and the plants don't judge us. Now, what an incredible statement, just in and of itself. But it unlocked something in my head, which is that is why I think I have such a problem with conditionality and curriculums and things coming out into nature, because I think nature has that space, and it is this is the way that this lens is going to cut, right? This is a space which does not judge you for any of those things, for your body, for your thoughts, for your effort, for your emotional state. It is just there. The trees do not move away from you. The plants do not, like, give you less sustenance. All of that stuff is just the most deeply accepting and inclusive. Maybe inclusive isn't quite the right word because it has other connotations. But do you know what I mean? Like, the nature is just there. You can be anything out there. And then the experience of some people of being out in nature will be colored by, I know what my experience of going out to nature was, I did not get my fire lighting badge, or I did not want to join in with this, or I was not wearing the uniform that everyone else was wearing, or the teacher didn't like the picture. There's just, to me, there's a huge disconnect between that conditionality that humans have brought to a space which inherently does not have conditional responses. How does that land with you?
It lands all kinds of ways. First of all, I was trying to take that statement of nature doesn't judge you, and I was like, do I believe that? And there was something kind of like, I do believe that, but also there was a little niggle, like, you know, like that would imply that if you were in nature, you would feel kind of like, I don't know, I was going to say kind of like so free because you're not being judged and you can just be who you instinctively want to be and behave the way you instinctively want to behave. But I think for some people that isn't true, and I think for me that isn't true. And I was like, why is that not true? Like, do I actually believe that nature is judging me? And I was like, if you are inclined towards animism, where you believe that the things that are living and not living, part of our world, are imbued with spirit, then I still think they're very non-judgmental, but I think that my duty of mutual respect
I'm with you.
means that it is not an unconditional environment, because I might do something and they go, oh, sorry, to like a plant or a tree.
Sure.
I would still think, oh, you know, I need to like not trample that thing. Oh God. Or, you know, if I walk past a bit of litter out in the woods, like, and then I think, oh, am I going to pick that up? Oh, I'm really busy. Oh God, no, I feel so guilty. Go back and pick up the litter.
Okay,
like,
I understand.
do you know what I mean?
I do understand.
So it's not that nature is judging me, but I feel it's like it's almost in a way still like being with people, because
But do you think that
I
applies?
kind of believe that they're a bit conscious.
I'm with you. I'm with you on the animism. I think there is, but I think there's a difference between having a relationship and having respect for those things versus the. So if you drop litter and then pick it up, the plants don't stop growing there because they're upset that you once dropped litter there. If you
No, but they might like spike you. I do believe there is a bit of me where if something hurts me in nature or something goes
you
wrong,
think
like
you deserved it.
Scratch. I think it's sort of intention. There is a bit of me that thinks that.
I am with you.
That it's a sign.
I am with
it means
you.
something. In the same way as you have to ask the elder before you take the wood.
Okay, but do you think that those are in any way linked to any of the... Is that to do with like behavior versus person? No. I'm with you.
No, I was laughing because I thought you were going to say, but do you think that's anything about your own mental health?
Well, yes, I'm circling around that, but I don't want to... I've sidestepped that very delicately. It was a little plie that I did around your mental health. I just went, ha-cha, ah-cha-cha, and back, where I go, okay.
What
I was going to say that list of things does not include behaviours. About being sad or happy, fast, slow, introverted, extroverted, heterosexual, homosexual, asexual, happy, sad.
Yes.
Your body does not fit the ideal, or you have a body that doesn't conform at all. Those are ways of being. And so I'm not arguing that what you've just said isn't true. I'm just differentiating those two things.
You're right to make that differentiation, because that is how I felt as you were talking. I was like, yes, I believe that. But also this other feeling where I do feel like I'm... Do you know what I mean? So yes, I would agree for those things, for sure, that you can go out and be outside, you know, if you can get there, if you can make yourself get there physically and emotionally, then yes, I do feel that you are allowed to be all of those things without having to mask.
And that's massive. And so that, and then okay, so then the other bit of that is me going that I something has unlocked in my brain about the conditionality that is sometimes brought, and so I am then thinking more about like, ooh, that's a really interesting thing if you could get people to, because I think if you got people on board with, you know, you can be all of these things in nature, nature does not judge you, then to go, do you help facilitate that, or do you hinder that with your practice or with how you are helping people access nature? I think that's a really interesting reflection point to.
I think so too. And I think that probably in the same way you were saying time spent outdoors means that some of the stuff that's happening outdoors rubs off on you, maybe. That also, I do think, now that I think about it, the more time that a group spends in nature, the more that lack of judgment and just acceptance and just everyone's just doing their thing rubs off on groups and us, I think. And so if you, as the, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I think just that, it just is. In the same way that no one goes, oh, why is the tree like growing there? That's kind of annoying. It's sort of my way. No one does that. It's that if you open yourself up to it, then it's much more easy to go, why is that person doing that thing? Oh, they just are.
Yeah.
It's not on purpose to irritate me, or why does that person prefer that? They just do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think it's
almost like modelling, isn't it? It's almost
the
like
woods. The woods is modelling
modelling.
to you. Absolute. You know.
Way to just be.
A way to
do
just
what
go.
you need to
Yeah,
do.
they're all right here. They're part of this, which is huge. I think there's something. Yeah. So like I've been holding that in for like 3 weeks to go. Oh, there's a huge thing here, which is about like the woods not being conditional, or that it's just so accepting, which I really love. I really, really love. And I really think that highlighting that to people could be a really radical thing to you know, like we talk about, you know, you can start with like I statements. You know, I statements are a way of being like, I absolutely am great with you, however you want to be. Like I, you know, while you're here doing the things, how interesting would it be to start phrasing people? Do you know what? The trees really don't mind. The trees will love you if you are like this or like this. Like the trees are not there coming out and going, you know, no autistic people in this woods, please. The trees are not there going like, only fit people in this woods, please. The trees are not doing any of that. Do you know what I mean? That's massive. And if you could reflect that back to people, how their perception of the outdoors might change. Particularly, I'm thinking that thing of like, so the ideal body and bodies that don't conform was one where I was like, yeah, and I can say this about my own practice. There was a lot where I just would go, we're running is what we do, and chasing games and physically fit and keep up and let's go. And actually I'd taken a super inclusive space and potentially put my own, maybe it's not conditions, maybe it's like biases. Like I was putting my own biases on, like, forest school is a place to be fit, forest school is a place to be this, the outdoors is a place for survival and hardcoreness. And I would say, actually, more and more, you and I have made the site that we're working in, you know, we've got armchairs, we've got blankets, we've got comfortable things, we've got shelter from the winds, we've got shelter from the rain, we've got like beautiful pieces of art strewn around the place that are more and more reflections of that, like, you are just as welcome here if you want to run up and down the hill as you are if you want to sit out in an armchair. Maybe the woods is rubbing off on us. It's basically what I'm saying. Oh, it was good to have said all that.
Big one.
Big one. Big one.
Big one. So does the book kind of say, because I know stuff I read about Biophilia is like scientists and psychologists trying to work out like what, but why? Like, why do humans love things that are alive and natural
Hmm.
and things? Is that does the author of this book kind of say, and that's one of the reasons why we are drawn towards nature and we love these things, or is that just kind of like a side note, or like what do they say about that
In a
side of things?
way, I think they are taught that. So there are many chapters in this, and each one is kind of talking about a different aspect of why we enjoy being in nature. So that is one aspect of this chapter, and then the next chapter is about that thing of visualizations and us, um, the visual imagery of being out in nature, the landscapes and the sparkling water. That makes us feel calm. So it's like a Venn
Mm-hmm.
diagram of like what makes you feel calm. Okay, it's the acceptance, it's the landscape. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so there's another bit in here that talks about a form of attention, like paying attention, that
Mm-hmm.
does not cost any energy, is fascination.
Mm-hmm.
Fascination is automatic. And I was like, ooh, that's an interesting differentiation between are you paying attention or are you fascinated? I don't think you, when someone is fascinated, everyone listening to this knows what it looks like when you are fascinated, when someone is fascinated. That does not cost energy. It doesn't cost mental energy, mental load. I really liked that, like, differentiation of like, oh, we can facilitate fascination, we can encourage fascination, as opposed to we can, in air quotes, develop attention. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Phrasing it as like, well, if someone isn't fascinated, it's that intrinsic external thing, isn't it? You
Yeah.
know, if someone is fascinated, that is intrinsic. You can find things and show them stuff, and then maybe they'll be fascinated.
Mm.
And then going on, and it's talking about, there's a bit of attention restoration theory in here. It talks about that being
Yeah.
restored by being in nature. Um, then it talks about that focusing on a single object or task. So there's a bit in this book where it talks. Sorry, hang on, I'm going to jump around a minute. If we regard, and this is a quote, if we regard the human brain as an evolved organ, specially designed, tricky word, to analyze and respond appropriately to the opportunities and constraints that existed in ancestral environments, we begin to look at human interactions with the natural world in new ways. Then later on in the book, it goes, focusing on a single object or task runs counter to our evolutionary behavioral pattern. Predators, time, scarcity, all of those things are something that would have developed the human brain as an organ to be like, you need to be careful about how you focus your attention. You should always have 10% running in the background on the bird song or the movement or the light. And so that's very interesting then to think about the ways in which people try to, again, in air quotes, develop an attention span. And
Mm.
if you frame that and go, okay, but that's not what that organ can do. It's not,
Mm.
it's not hard, and it's hard not to use words like designed or built or
Yeah.
whatever. That's not what it's been trained to
Evolved.
do. That's not what it has evolved to do, is single
Yeah.
attention on a thing for a long time. So that is like, that's really interesting, and taking that like evolutionary lens and putting it onto lots of behaviors and going, okay, would this have served someone in an ancestral environment?
Could I counter
Yeah,
that
please
though
do.
with the neurodiversity
Yeah,
lens, which would actually say some brains,
sure.
not our design, some brains develop so that they are able to pay attention to lots of things at once,
Hmm.
or most brains, you could say. Many other brains do not develop in that way and are actually really specialists at paying attention to just one thing for a very long
Hmm.
time. And that has also species wide
Oh,
benefits.
completely. I suppose if you include ancestral environments to mean of a,
Ancestral
what did I
environments,
say?
incestual.
Shit. Oh
If you take an
no!
incestual
Fuck.
environment
Fuck.
and No, you probably did. I just heard it as ancestral, and I couldn't let it go. Sorry. You take an ancestral.
If you take the ancestral environment to include that groupness, that being in a group, that community, being in a group is part of it. It's very rare for humans ancestrally to have been on their own. Therefore, being in a group, having some specialization, having some variance, having all those things, you can go like, as part of a group, this is beneficial, this is also beneficial, this is also beneficial.
Yeah.
Yes, I totally take that on board. Massive. Okay. Oh, sorry, there's a weird quote here that just says, no one throws homosexual animals out of the forest.
Well,
which is a quote about the acceptance, but I didn't get it in time. The right point. So I'm just going to say, in the middle of a different topic, no one throws homosexual animals out the forest.
Exactly.
It sounds a bit.
That's the sticker. That's the next sticker.
It sounds a bit like no one puts baby in the corner.
Pride Month. Yeah,
it's June next month. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Forest School podcast sticker.
Yeah, love it. Okay, here's an interesting one. Walking in nature, being in nature, releases serotonin. Serotonin is a natural pain reliever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an argument both ways there, which is that like going in nature is good if you have got like a little bit of an injury, but it also must mean that injuries sustained out in nature must be way worse than they appear because we're already in a pain-free state. You've already had it knocked down 20% by being out in the woods. So that scraped knee is actually way worse than it looks.
Well, 20%.
No. I made up 20%. I can find it. Yeah. It doesn't have a number on it. It just says, pain relief. I guess it's different for different people, different biochemistry, those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. So, okay, hang on. There's a quote here that I've written down. Read in full. Okay, are you ready for a big quote? This is my second big hitter.
My brain might explode.
This is my second big hitter. The Eco-Psychosomatic system. That's not the whole quote. The human being is a unity of body and mind, interacting and inseparably connected. This knowledge is reflected in psychosomatics. Psychosomatics doesn't mean we are only imagining we are sick. It imagines how mental processes become physical and noticeable, and vice versa, how physical processes influence the psyche. You still on board?
Yeah.
I recommend expanding this concept and referring to eco-psychosomatics. In addition to the unity between body and mind, this science would also recognize how both have a highly complex relationship with the environment and nature. All three, body, mind, and nature, build an even larger unit that emerges from evolution and is equally inseparable. In this sense, the human body does not end at its external borders, but is part of an eco-psychosomatic system. End quote.
100% agree.
Okay, moving on.
100%. That's the end of that. But that is even. I mean, it's huge, but it's also like really obvious in a way because for me, that would include things like the weather affecting people's moods. That would affect temperature. That would affect, like the noise of the wind and how that makes you feel, and all those things. Or birds all suddenly stopping singing and you being like, "What? What's up? Something's happening. I feel tense." But even people who might not be particularly nature connected would still, I'm sure, agree that their mood is affected by the weather, and that's part of the same thing, surely.
Oh yeah. Do you think so? Yeah. This is I'm going to say a controversial thing here, and I mean this with like all the love in the world. I'm just interested in like pulling at some threads, putting some things together. So we were talking to Nina Lovelace in the last episode about urban forest schools, and a lot of that conversation was about sites and how sites might not initially be super nature filled, And I'm thinking about sessions that might outdoor sessions, not specifically forest school, but let's say, you know, that thing of like, just go to whatever nature you've got, right? Is a thing. If you went to nature that was actively under threat, so like whether that's like low level, like it's the like litter, or there's something higher level, like there's runoff coming down from the stuff and it's under the ground, not in a way that physically affects humans' bodies or minds, but that does affect the nature. There are trees dying, there are, you know, plants that are unwell. How does that then tie into this eco-psychosomatic thing in terms of like, would you still, if you genuinely believe that, can you still recommend that as a place to go and interact with nature? Or are you then putting people in a position of saying you should go to this place that is going to have a negative or potentially harmful eco-psychosomatic relationship?
What, because you pick up on the fact that there is illness and disease and stress amongst the living
if you're
things
going
there,
full,
and you start to feel tenseness, stress.
if all those things are interconnected, does that mean you can't be around ash dieback? Does that mean that you can't?
I guess you'd have to measure out the beneficial effects of being in nature as opposed to not being in nature, and then the difference. You know, it's like if the epitome of eco-psycho, whatever you just said, somatic,
eco-psychosomatic.
If like the bestest.
It's definitely a Prodigy song, Eco-Psychosomatic.
Yeah. If it is the savannah in good health,
sure,
then that's fine. But is like a skanky bit of grass next to the bins behind Asda, is that better? Obviously it's not as good as a savannah, but is it better than
nothing?
The inside of an office block with the blinds drawn.
Do you think they're okay? I agree with that level of assessment. I think that is valid. Do you think there will be people listening to this who will have had the experience where they've gone, I knew something wasn't right way before that tree came down. I knew that something was, I could feel, go to that bit of the woods or go to that bit of the session and didn't like it. Don't know why. And then we found out that, you know, go on, tell me your thing.
I haven't had that experience, and I've never spoken to anyone who's had that experience, but I don't know if anyone can relate to going to a place which isn't to do with people, like, but the vibe, the atmosphere, it's something wrong. And obviously, if you go to a place with people, then that's kind of more understandable, because you can feel, you can almost like feel the energy, like, oh my God, well, before I came in, they had an argument, or everyone's a bit worried about that person over there or something. Yeah. But a place just like a field or a woodland, and you just go, and we say bad ground. It's bad ground. You just get this creepy feeling that you just don't want to be there. And it does feel really instinctive and sort of primal. And I used to get it really strongly when I was a kid. I haven't had it for a while. But so around certain types of tree, around, oh my God, there was a really spooky place that I used to go when I was a kid. It was almost like I had to go there to creep myself out. And there wasn't anything that would be stereotypically creepy. It was just that the trees were poplar trees, and they did a weird kind of shiny thing when the wind was blowing, and it was just freaky. It was background. So maybe I was picking up on some kind of like pollution in the earth or something. Or the badgers under the ground were crying and I could hear them. I don't know what it was. Background.
Okay. Well, segueing from the bit of grass behind the bins at Asda, there's a whole chapter in this book which really caught me off guard, and I have just made the note, banging in the outdoors.
You did allude to this the other day. I was like, what on earth?
No, I didn't allude. No, that sounds really wrong. I didn't allude to it.
Is a little place where we can get together.
There is a full story in this book about people going through
building a love shack.
About people going through like marriage counselling, and part of this I always mark the podcast as explicit, right? But if you are listening to this with young people in the car, you've already fucked it because we've already stuff in crap. Okay, it's going to get worse. Talking about as part of their like marriage counselling, going off and like shagging against different trees and describing it as having a threesome with the tree. That they are like this lady in the middle, man, then lady, then tree, and the lady being like, it was a threesome with me in the tree. And
is this just the author's own personal
no,
experience?
it's like a case study. And then going off and finding it, and then it's talking about like putting plants in your bedroom, and like that's where we again evolutionary ancestral experiences.
Yeah.
Banging behind the bit. No, banging.
Okay.
Banging in nature. Now, look, some people listen to this podcast and they're like, I'm here for the tips, right? I'm here for the tips and tricks for running forest school sessions. Nothing to do with that. Please, oh my God, please. No.
Wow.
But then it goes into really detailed descriptions of how to cordon off a bit of your garden so that it's not in view, different ways that you can make, like...
The love shack is...
Yeah. I mean, at no point in the descriptions does it say make sure it's evergreen, right? Which leads me to think that you could have, you know, a strong October breeze come through and suddenly, you know...
Well, evergreen's quite prickly though, isn't it? Often.
Yeah, but something...
I can't imagine that would be particularly comfortable.
Yeah, but they're all about like making a little doorway
Spruce.
And then you're behind... You know, I'm thinking about like, you know, if you had a little ring of cherry laurel.
Oh no, that's bad juju.
Cherry laurel?
That gives me... Yeah.
That's not your preferred third?
Flipping 8 laurel? No, spooky. Unless it's a really, really big species and it's at like a National Trust landscape garden and it's gone all funky and you can climb on it. I can imagine that.
Listen, I'm interested that they've gone for the tree rather than like... If you were going to try and start people off, I think you would describe moss. I think you would describe moss as the like... That's the... Sitting on a moss carpet, right? It's an enjoyable experience. Yeah. Okay. Are you ready for this to get slightly worse? Okay, great. So.
Yes.
When you are born, when one is born, decomposing compounds in the amniotic fluid come through your mouth and nose during birth.
Yes.
However that birth happens, amniotic fluid in your mouth and nose.
Yep.
They have worked out that part of that compound is the same compound that is the smell of roses. And they are proffering in this book that is why roses are potentially linked with romanticism and ooh la la, because it is to do with the old jelly belly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So the smell of roses reminds you of your mum's tum.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And also that we as humans would smell it on newborn babies.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, you just violently bent over like you were going to be sick.
I just picked up my pencil.
I thought I'd really gone too far and you were like, okay, great.
I dropped my pen.
Okay.
On the flip side of that, why? I know the true of the fact, but I do not know why the fact. Hawthorn blossom smells like decomposing flesh. Why is that? And that is, well, I mean, what's the reason? But for that reason, don't bring it into your house. Bad vibes. Bad omens.
Bad
omens, because he's the dead. So yeah, it was called like, you know, you're gonna prophesy a death if you bring it into the house. And then they discovered that it's the same compound as in rotting flesh after many years of this.
Okay, this is a nicer note on smells. Green is the only colour which English language speakers basically agree what that smell is. Red doesn't have a smell, purple, blue, white, yellow, people interpret all those colours differently. But green is, people will say, it smells green in here. Oh, that's a very like green scent. But it's a visual metaphor. It's a visual term. But none of the other English colour words have got that association, or rather that like uniformity, which is very interesting, isn't it? That we have associated a visual. I was saying to you the other day about the leaves on the beaches being the right green.
Oh, acid green at this time of year, yeah. What synesthesia? That's what it's called, isn't it? Where
that's when it's all hooked up differently.
You know, taste, sound, or whatever.
Yeah.
Smelling a colour. Yeah.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Okay, and then we get towards the end of this book, and the end of this book is lots of different things, lots of like recommendations towards the end, but there is also a bit where they're talking about death, which seems an appropriate way to get towards the end of this podcast. Everything dies. That is the only universal connector of living things. Plants decompose where they stand and feed back into their ecosystems and their offspring. So making this point that like plants, you know, if we're talking again about modeling, that they give back as they die. And again, an interesting thing if you reflected on being with the woods and how the woods is accepting and things, and the woods, and that there is a universal connection between us and all of those trees and all of those plants and all of those birds, and that is by and large the thing that is connecting us, is that one day we will all stop. Which is just a very like, I think that's quite nice. I think that's very nice to share a thing, because you don't share the other end. We're all born in different ways. We're all, you know, grow in different ways, move in different, but we will all stop in basically the same way, which is very interesting. And then the author talks towards the end about how most reports or most findings for humans, hearing is the last active sense before death. And the author of this book talks about how birdsong is the thing that millions upon millions upon millions of humans have heard as the last thing before they die.
That's nice.
And then they talk about wanting to die in their garden with birds. And again, possibly in a like evolution ancestral environment, I think there's something quite nice about going out with birds, like so many other people. You know, it's that thing again, isn't it? It's in many senses new or unusual for that not to be the last thing a human hears.
Are you saying that you want a sky burial and that we should all remember to lay you down and let the birds pick out your eyes?
Yeah, but I want little birds. I want like just robins. So I want to be there for a while. I'm going to be there for a really long time.
Just tiny piece by tiny piece.
By tiny piece.
Singing in your ear holes. As your ear holes are still getting the sound whilst they pluck your flesh. Oh, sorry, that was very. I couldn't handle the
okay, so the
earnestness.
No.
So I made a joke.
Okay, so if you had to earnestly for a second, just be earnest for a second. Try, really hold it. No, that didn't last, did it? I didn't even get the question out.
Okay, I'm going to close my eyes. Go for it.
You close your eyes. We're in different rooms.
I'm breathing. Tell me.
Okay, my question is just which individual bird song would you like to hear last?
Oh my god, that's like such a beautiful and bleak question at the same time.
Thanks.
Oh my god.
Because, okay, now I'm going to chew this out for a minute, because I don't want to hear a wren. Right?
No,
that's too much. That's too much at the end. I don't want to hear a buzzard or something that's like a bird of prey. Okay, so let's...
It's gonna peck out your eyes.
What about an owl? Would you like to hear a tawny?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
Blackbird, 100%.
Really?
Yeah. So soothing, relaxing, beautiful, just singing for the sake of singing. Oh my goodness. And have you ever heard that piece of music called, I think it's called Slowed Down Blackbird by Chris somebody?
No.
Oh, it's so lush. He's recorded a blackbird. At the beginning, it just is normal speed, and then he slows it down and down and down gradually through the record.
Do you know what? It's not particularly poetic, but I think I could be convinced to go with a wood pigeon, just to be sort of gently cooed. And also, wherever that poetically stops, it sounds pretty good. You know, like if it's going, my toe bleeds, Betty, my toe bleeds, Betty, my toe, my toe, my toe, my toe, my toe, my toe, my It's time to thank the Patreon people, but I'm going to thank them in a slightly different lens this time. Normally, we thank you lovely, lovely people that are supporting us on Patreon from behalf of me and Wem. But you guys on Patreon are the ones who have supported this episode. You have brought this episode to all the people listening. So there are people listening to this episode who got to listen to a podcast because of the generosity of these lovely Patreon people. If you want to be somebody who is generous enough to support this podcast and to help give it to more people, then you can head to patreon.com/The Forest School Podcast. But this episode with Lucy Jones was brought to you by Rachel and Karen, Matthew, Catherine, Gareth, Rebecca, Rosie, Julie, Rachel, Candice, Claire, Heidi, Louise, Michael and Anna. So on behalf of everybody that's listening to this podcast, I would like to say thank you to all you people for making this podcast possible. And if you want to sign up, you can go to patreon.com/The Forest School Podcast.